Welcome to Vision Plus, a program featuring a positive outlook, dealing with everyday situations of marriage, children, and business with challenges and opportunities. Believing Philippians 4:13. You and I can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. Teacher, author, speaker, delighting audiences from New York to Sacramento with a heart and message for the people today. Here's Bonnie Liphart.
Carry yourself that way.
Hello and welcome. I'm Bonnie Liphart, and you're watching Vision Plus. We're over here talking, but now we're going to be talking and include you. Wouldn't you love that? Well, if you've been watching in the last couple of programs, we have been doing a series on, I call it Trance, the Sleeping of America. And the whole purpose of this came about as a result of my own daughter Emily, who was a Russian interpreter, helped to take 1 million Bibles to Russia, came back home and was interviewed at Cedarhurst in Huntsville, Alabama by the CIA. And it was shortly after that that she was hit by a car. She ran across the street to her car and killed. In a rather mysterious way, the police force did not take a breathalyzer, did not see what caused it. So we have wondered, and we're now going to have her death investigated. He didn't tell how fast he was going in the police report, and so many questions that we have. And had the opportunity to meet two people that know more, not about my daughter, but about unusual, unexplained things that are going on in our country, in our community, right here, whether we're watching in the Tennessee Valley area, Lansing, Michigan, Georgia, or Mississippi, doesn't matter. Wherever you are watching, these things are happening. And in order to honor my daughter by doing more investigation in what is going on in our community, she was exposing the occult with a program called Church Alert, where she went all over the country telling people about things happening. Then she ends up not alive. Well, we are asking you to help us with this person you're going to meet now. Perhaps if you saw a couple of the other programs, you've met her already. But in continuing this mini-series about Awakening America, Kathy O'Brien's daughter, who is still living, has been used in pornography films and pedophilia, that's sex with children with adults, and has been mind controlled or brainwashed, if you may use understand that word phrase a little bit more easily. And we want to find out from her and from Mark Phillips, who is a therapist, a person who is you may think of it as a deprogrammer, or a person who can rescue a victim of this white slavery and get them help. And every person that can recognize, well, I will say almost every person that can recognize that they are perhaps a victim, that they do not have total control of their mind, can get help from Mark or from a doctor that he's working with. He's working with doctors all across this United States and Canada in helping people that may be in your family, maybe you, maybe in your neighborhood, maybe in your church, your school, wherever it is. We want you to meet them now. Mark Phillips, welcome to
Hello.
Channel 58 to Vision Plus and Victory Network.
Bonnie.
Kathy O'Brien, welcome. I'm glad we can say you're a former victim of this horrific information about incest, being a slave to top officials in this country, and being involved in forced to take money in exchange for drugs into other countries at the very top level.
As a reintegrated survivor and deprogrammed survivor of White House, Pentagon level mind control, which is referred to as Project Monarch, I feel extremely fortunate to have had Mark Phillips expertise and compassion and helping me regain my memory and my mind in order that I can reveal what I witnessed and what I experienced as a high-level mind control slave in our country, how mind control is proliferating, why it's proliferating, in hopes that the many numerous survivors out there, the people who are still being victimized, can wake up, find the peace of mind that I have, and that children like my daughter Kelly will finally be granted their right to rehabilitation for the mind control atrocities that they endured, in order that we can put our country back on its feet and stop all this crime, violence, and occultism that's going on.
Mark, are there very many physicians that know about Project Monarch? And
There are several physicians that have come forth just recently, Bonnie.
Mental health.
Yes, within the mental health community. Now, physicians on the level of psychologist and psychiatrist is what I think you're talking about. There have been a few to step forward. But you must understand that psychiatrists and psychologists are licensed, and they're licensed by their local governments. And since this is a so-called threat to national security for Ms. O'Brien or anyone else who survived these horrendous tortures to step forward, these doctors are not wanting to be put in a position of being the ones to expose. You see, I'm not a licensed physician.
That's why they don't want to go fall public with these discoveries?
Well, and two, the APA, the
American Psychiatric
Association, they are the primary source for insurance. And you know medical insurance, what's happened to it recently in the last few years. It's skyrocketed. Well, this cooperative insurance effort, if you're a psychiatrist and you can't get insurance through the APA, you just about can't practice. So if the APA, as a Washington lobby, has pressure put on it, this is a matter of national security, don't talk about Project Monarch, the doctor is silenced, because he can no longer help people, he can no longer practice if he opens his mouth. So, enter Mark Phillips and a lot more people just like me that are stepping forward, because I have connections in and out of the medical community, mental health community, and I have friends from within the intelligence communities, like the CIA.
Mark, when we were doing the research about you and Kathy prior to your coming here, when I had that stack of material like this, one of the researchers went in and talked to a local physician, psychiatrist, and presented the material to them, and they said, we don't want to see the material, we don't want to be involved, we just want to go and do our job, we want to go home at night, have our family, we don't want to be involved, and they flat would not help. We said, okay, is it possible that there is such a thing as white slaves and Project Monarch and pedophilia going on and incest to the extent that it would cause multiple personality disorders? And that physician right here in this area said, absolutely. It not only is possible, it is happening,
yes,
but I'm not going to be involved in it. I don't want to be involved in it.
The three monkey syndrome.
Three monkey syndrome?
Yes. Hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. In other words, don't expose evil, and evil will consume you.
How would I recognize a person that had been a slave if I saw one?
Well, IDing a slave, I've taken physicians to malls all over the United States and Canada, and we will sit like a typical mall-lite, as they call them, on a bench, and what you look for is the toes are pointed out or pointed severely in. They'll have a waxy complexion. They'll have a fixed smile.
Different from somebody that's just drugged, you know, on drugs.
Very different.
Very different.
Very
Okay, give me an idea of how it could be different.
The person looks robotic. Yeah, exactly.
Very good.
Because a drug person would have the bloodshot eyes, perhaps, or some.
Perhaps.
Well, if they're
cocaine doesn't make your eyes bloodshot, and neither does heroin. But these people look very robotic.
Very often wide-eyed with pupillary dilation.
The pupils are usually blacked out. In other words, their iris is lost. It's all just blacked out. It's because of trauma. If you saw someone who just...
In other words, you would hardly see the color of their eyes.
Sometimes not at all. I could not see Kathy's color of her eyes and did not even know what the color was for some 5 months.
Into
5 months into therapy, before the color started coming in. She has beautiful hazel eyes, and I never saw it.
Now, let's just use an example. You're in Dallas, Texas. You're in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yes.
You're in Lansing, Michigan.
Yes.
You go to a mall, and you are there looking for a person to prove to that doctor that they can, or prove to me that you can see. Okay, tell me how long would we sit there? 3 days?
Unfortunately, we would only probably have to sit in a city the size of Huntsville, where we have a heavy concentration of this activity.
A couple 100,000 people.
A couple of thousand people, but Huntsville is an exception because it has a higher ratio. But if you went to Dallas, for instance, or Houston, in an average size mall, it would take probably about 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
I would
Yes.
have thought so to
In
5.
Huntsville,
5 minutes?
5 minutes.
And you'd see someone that is programmed?
Within 5 minutes, I could approach this
Oh,
person
come on.
and trigger them, Bonnie,
Trigger them?
and they would follow me out to my car,
How
or
could you
for that matter, anywhere I wanted
Trigger
them to
them?
go.
Give me an example.
These people are in a
or-
perpetual trance, Bonnie. If you had just witnessed a horrible accident and your eyes had blacked out and you were just kind of wandering around aimlessly,
In a
or
daze.
if someone had said, there's a police officer or a telephone right over there, while you were motivating yourself to that police officer, to that telephone, and someone interceded and stopped you, like I would be the person walking to the mall, perhaps going in to buy a product at a particular store, or to make a cocaine or heroin delivery, as many of them are doing. They use the malls. They could not think of what they were what they were there for, in other words.
As a mind control slave myself, I had no ability to reason or comprehend. I didn't know who I was, where I'd been, where I was going. I didn't know how old I was. I had no memory whatsoever of any of my past, or even I had no comprehension that I was not remembering my past. The only thing I could do was exactly what I was told to do.
Well,
the rest of my mind
after you were
had shut down.
rescued and deprogrammed, and then you were, well, how did you know what year it was, or what? Tell me about that.
It was a very unusual feeling. It was somewhat like a Rip Van Winkle kind of wakening up. And once my eyes were open to what I had experienced, my memory was coming back. I realized that I had lost at least 10 years of my life that I'd had no conscious memory of. I lived 10 years under total control, where in effect someone was just simply controlling my body and making it carry out different criminal and pornographic operations that I never would have involved myself in whatsoever if I'd had any free will. But my free will was taken from me. And once I woke up to that, the technology and the things that had transpired during those years were things I had to catch up on.
Bonnie,
I'm still catching up on
do
them.
you realize that with a simple $50 stun gun, that you can brainwash someone and take control of their mind if you know the formula?
Okay, what's a stun gun exactly?
A stun gun is an electrical device. It puts out a high voltage, DC, or direct current. 120,000 volts is very common now.
Looks like that would electrocute someone.
No, it doesn't even interfere with the heart muscle. What it does is it interferes with your brain chemistry. It lowers your blood sugar until you go into in essence, shock.
Insulin shock type of
It's a type
shock.
of shock, where your subconscious begins to become your logic, and your logic shuts down, and you can no longer logically think for yourself. And so someone else can go into your head through your ears by saying certain things and literally take over your mind.
Well, how is it used and what?
It's used, if you can control someone's mind, Bonnie, you can control their bodies. And these people are using other people.
Well, do you know how to dress in the morning? Do you know how the usual things like...
Very often I was told how to dress.
Very often.
And where to go, what to do.
Did you not have like a room of your own anywhere
No.
where you had things that were yours
No.
and knew where to go get your makeup and your clothes?
Well, I could go through a regular routine of work that was scheduled for me.
Which could include
doing farm chores and dressing myself and dressing my daughter and sending her to school and picking her up from school, because those were a matter of routine that I was conditioned and trained to do through the programming, but it was any time that where a normal person would have to themselves for whatever they wanted to do. Those were the times when I was ordered to carry out certain activities, such as a cocaine muling and cocaine distribution, pornography, prostitution, and other criminal activities.
Now, I know from prior days spent with you that you do believe in God. You personally, how did you learn that? You certainly didn't learn it from your parents, even though you went to a quote Catholic school. You didn't really learn it there. That was
no. The Catholic school was very much a part of my abuse base, and because Satanism is a reversal of Christianity. It's not the spiritual aspect of what's happening here. What has happened is that government studies that were taken from the Nazi Germany were put into a scientific form whereby a trauma base could be used. Satanism was preferred, and Satanism is a reversal of Christianity. Therefore, the Christian community has been horribly distorted, used, and people have been victimized even within churches, such as you're hearing so much about the Catholic Church and pedophile activities, because they're traumatizing kids for Project Monarch and other mind control operations. And the Christian community...
Being sex between children and adults.
Yes.
Being,
yes.
And traumatized is simply they're scared to death. They're scaring them to
yes, once something's so horrible...
Frightening them out of their mind.
Okay.
Literally.
That's
literally. And if something so
what...
horrible happened to frighten a person out of their mind, once that person, like myself, has regained the memory and the mind, nobody really cares to hear about it because it was so horrible that it drove me that way.
But yet
other people don't want to deal with it.
How did you jump over to believe? You personally believe in a creator of the creator?
I was able to make that decision and make that choice for myself after I was reintegrated, after I was deprogrammed, and after I was in control of my own life, whereby I could make that kind of decision and choice for myself.
Now,
yes.
You had used a lot of the classics, the children's classics, said that they were part of the programming of people, and
that's one
had
way,
included
that's one
triggers.
way, Bonnie, if we have any viewers out there that have unusual, I hate to use the word fixations, but if they have an unusual
well, that's
fixation.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Say the Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz, and I have a large representative poster of it here. The Wizard of Oz, of course, was written back in the late 1800s by a German, Frank Baum, I believe, and its purpose was for a child's fairy tale. But the psychological ingredients can be twisted, just like Christianity can be reversed and twisted to become something horrible, as in Satanism.
And Jim Jones, yes.
But this Wizard of Oz programming is done on a much higher level of what we call white slavery. These are the people that this thing begun, you know, back in the late 50s. So Ms. O'Brien was born in '57. So she fit right in. Her family was involved from the standpoint
in
of...
the incest and the drugs and all of the...
And once my father was brought into Project Monarch, he was granted immunity from prosecution for the abuses that he had made me endure through the incest and pornography.
And your brothers and sisters.
Yes, and my brothers and sisters who are still being victimized.
She's from Michigan area.
Muskegon, Michigan. Mm-hmm. And the Wizard of Oz, my father was taught that when they took him to a training seminar in Boston, Massachusetts for a period of 2 weeks to learn how to raise me in Project Monarch mind control. And at that time, they told him to use Wizard of Oz themes to confuse my mind so that I could no longer separate fantasy from reality. It was used in the same way that a lot of time Disney themes are used and distorted.
Yeah.
For example, while I was being pornographically used, the man who was running the camera for the child pornography told me as a young child, my brother, that he also ran a camera for the Mickey Mouse Club. and for Walt Disney, and that any time I watched a Walt Disney, that he was looking
He
through
was just,
TV at me.
just lying, wasn't he? He told you that.
Totally distorting it. So the Wizard of Oz and Disney themes are very, very commonly used in mind control.
Sesame Street.
Yeah, different themes like that.
Alice in Wonderland.
Star Wars even is used. Anything that's on a fantasy level to confuse the mind on what's fantasy, what is reality, so that when a child, say for instance, says, is raped by their father who's wearing a Mickey Mouse costume and has
or
this...
a Darth Vader costume.
A Mickey Mouse, and it has this Mickey Mouse fantasy conditioning, then he goes to a therapist and says, Mickey Mouse raped me. And people don't know what's really going on until they look further and realize what the child is saying is, my father in a Mickey Mouse costume raped me, and I was confused with fantasy on Disney themes. You know, and a child can't think to say that until they've been through the kind of therapy that I've been so fortunate to have been through with Mark Phillips.
Now, I read in the Reader's Digest that there are over 100,000 kids that disappear each year in this country. Do you believe that's really true, and is it related to this Project Monarch?
Yes.
You know, just
is.
My home state of Arkansas, they had 3 little boys to disappear in West Memphis. Well, they found the boys, but they had been mutilated.
And that was the day before a satanic holiday, by the way.
And then in Waco, Texas, well, it was actually during the time of Koresh, but at that time another 8-year-old boy, this happened to him where he was mutilated in the same way. He'd gone into a Kmart store, or Walmart, one of those I shouldn't have said.
Sure.
Some kind of store like that. Told his mom, I want to go to the men's room, you know, the restroom, and he didn't come out, and she went in and found he had been mutilated. So, how is it, your opinion, 100,000 kids, is that ridiculous?
Let me say I really don't know if these figures are accurate. The missing and exploited children out of Washington, D.C. represents a tiny, tiny fraction. Let me tell you something, Bonnie. I work very closely with a number of retired FBI persons. One in particular, a very visible fellow who was head of the largest FBI office in Los Angeles, of course, Ted Gunderson. Ted has given me an incredible education on this, and let me explain. If your car is stolen, the FBI knows about it within 24 hours and notifies every state in the United States to be on the lookout for your automobile. If your child is stolen and you report it to the FBI, they tell you good luck. They refuse to allow a multi-jurisdictional or a federal clearinghouse for the names. And now, why would this be that you can get your car back, but you can't get your child back? If you want, if you want your child back who has been abducted or has just disappeared from your home or your yard or the store that he's gone into or she's gone into, there's no recourse except for you to get out and hang posters and beg people to be on the lookout and show the pictures.
From the level that I experienced, I witnessed a lot of what was happening to these children. Some of them are used to traumatize others for mind control purposes, and other children that are missing are the ones who are traumatized by the death of those children.
Yes.
And once that happens, their mind can be manipulated and controlled, and these children are used as sex slaves very often, and in child pornography, and very often even sold out of this country into different countries.
So what's the solution? I know that our Heavenly Father God, that He is the answer, that prayer does a lot of things. And He uses people. You know, people are used the same as there's no. The devil uses people,
yes.
And our Heavenly Father, God, Creator of all mankind, uses people. What can we people do to help you get your daughter, Kelly O'Brien Cox, back again? What do you want us to do?
Number one, I think if everybody would listen to the wake-up call and open their eyes to the reality of what's going on mind control atrocities in this country, that would be a big step towards rehabilitation for all victims and survivors, and ultimately, in my personal case, for my daughter. My daughter continues to be denied rehabilitation for what she has endured.
Because you don't have the money to do it. For
I don't have the funding for it, and my daughter, because of the White House Pentagon level that she was born into and subjected to mind control programming since birth, requires very, very specialized care with a
Which
Dr.
is available.
Yes, through a Dr. Bennett Braun.
Dr. Jesus can use Dr. Bennett Braun of Chicago.
Of Chicago, Illinois, who has written the books on the subject, reputed to be the very, very best in dealing with multiple personality disorder, mind control. Because the state of Tennessee,
she's in an institution right now.
Yes, and she's in the custody of the state of Tennessee, because through a series of threats and events, Kelly was thrust into the Tennessee mental health system. And once that happened, the only way that I could get funding for her
So if you had the money...
If I had the money, I could
get her. You could
absolutely.
Get her. Okay, so
and we've been 4 years working towards that goal.
Okay.
4 long years.
So in addition to that, you request cards, letters of support,
Please.
and enough response and support could incite some action so that it wouldn't take dollars. It would take dollars, but it could be done through the system.
Right. The system, the very system that's denying her rehabilitation would be forced.
Now, Kelly O'Brien Cox and Abbott Jordan, Charter Lakeside, Bridges South, 2911 Brunswick Road, Memphis, Tennessee 38134, or you can get in touch with me, 205-582-0240, or you have a post office box, or there's one.
Yes, they can contact me, Mark Phillips, P.O. Box 158352, Nashville, Tennessee. That's P.O. Box 158352, and that's Nashville, Tennessee 37215.
Mark Phillips and Kathy O'Brien, thank you. We will be returning with another program. Be sure and watch for the 4th in the series that I call Trance, the Sleeping of America. We're waking people up to what is going on in our neighborhoods. I'm Bonnie Libhart. Bless your heart for watching.
Without a vision, the people perish. Welcome to Vision Plus, a program featuring a positive outlook, dealing with everyday situations of marriage, children, and business with challenges and opportunities. Believing Philippians 4:13. You and I can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. Teacher, author, speaker, delighting audiences from New York to Sacramento with a heart and message for the people today. Here's Bonnie Libhart.
I'm Bonnie Libhart, and you're watching Vision Plus. Without a vision, the people perish. Well, we're in one of the most exciting times of the year for us, and that's the Thanksgiving holiday. And there's so many things to be thankful for. Always giving thanks. I just looked up in the Bible recently about all the verses it has about being thankful and having gratitude. Don't you just love to be around a person that has a lot of gratitude? Well, we want to just cover a moment how this all started in our country, and then in a moment you're going to meet someone that our country was founded on freedom of religion. When the Pilgrims, in fact, the word pilgrim means one who travels for religious reasons, and they had wanted to get away from a place where they were stifled and had to practice their religion in a certain way, and that's one of the reasons that people came to this great United States. Of course, it wasn't known as the United States at that time. On Plymouth Rock in 1620, was, well, maybe the first time that we hear about or think about the Pilgrims being here for the period of time. About 1621, William Bradford in that fall had a time of prayer and harvest and gratefulness to the Indians, the American Indians at the time, Massasoit and Wampanoag, and they wanted to get together and show their appreciation, like many of you are doing this weekend and today, where that we get together and sure we overeat, and we do a lot of family, I call it brag and complain period, where we brag about things that are happening in the family and how great our family is. But isn't that good to have some family members that can do that? Or if you're like Tony and I were one Thanksgiving time, we actually were traveling through the country and stopped in some place in, I think it was Flagstone, Arizona, and stopped in some little tiny cafe type place and had turkey and cranberry sauce and got on our way traveling back with a street sweeper coming here to the south again. But during that time of life, so whether it's you're with family or you're traveling alone, we want you to enjoy the day and to find something to be thankful for. And we're going to find something to be thankful for in just a moment when we learn a little bit more about evolution and creationism, and a big controversy, a debate that's coming up over that in the very near future. And I want to invite you to that. So I want you to get your pencil and paper ready so that when you meet our guest, you will be able to write down the times of that and how it came about. By the way, back there in 1621, when William Bradford in that fall put that together for well as the Indians and the American Indians and the people that were there, I love this part. 5 women did the cooking for all of those people. I'm sure one of them would have been a woman like my mother, who could put more together at 89 years old than most of us could possibly ever eat. I love to go to, when we have potlucks at church, just to see. It's amazing. I do believe it's like the pot of oil, where it seems like that you just don't dent the food when you're finished with the day. But it was at that period of time when this period of thankfulness or gratefulness lasted for 3 days. And then it wasn't till about 1860, oh well, that's almost a couple hundred years later, almost, when Mrs. Sarah Hale went to then President Abraham Lincoln and say, let's make this a national holiday. And at that time in 1860, all but 2 states said, let's go for it. And then, of course, in 1863 was the time of the Civil War, and they were wanting a way to unite nationally. So they decided on the 4th Thursday in November, actually it was really 1941 before they actually counted it as a national holiday. But whether you're watching a parade, we used to always watch the Macy's parade, but whatever you're doing this day, be thankful for what's going on in your life. And perhaps you'd like to learn about something you can go to in a few days, and that would be told by our guest that I have here today, Thomas Thrasher. He is going to be in a public debate on the theory of evolution. And welcome, Brother Thrasher, and tell us a little bit about, first of all, you're a science teacher. I mean, you're a math teacher. Math. And you're going to debate one of your co-teachers, David White, who's a science teacher, aren't you?
Right.
How did that come about, and when is it going to be?
Well, the debate will be December 2nd at 7 o'clock. That's a Thursday night. And the way that it basically occurred, David and I are friends, but we disagree on things quite frequently. And one of the things we've talked about some is the theory of evolution. And so we just got together basically and said, well, why don't we have a public discussion, and that'll give the students and the public who wish to attend an opportunity to hear both sides. Because so often, of course, I teach in a public school, and the creation view generally is not presented. But in all of the textbooks you have, of course, the theory of evolution presented sometimes as if it's a fact. And so we thought this would give an opportunity for both sides to be heard, and people could weigh the evidence and decide for themselves as to what is true.
It's especially interesting to me, and I know to a lot of people, but I had an opportunity just recently to go to a reenactment of the Scopes trial in Dayton, Tennessee, where David, wait a minute, his name is Jeff Moore, and the Distance were there, and they were putting together, he's a contemporary Christian singer from Nashville, and they were putting together a tape. Well, he had a tape already called Evolution Redefined, talking about about evolution. I want to hear about creationism, actually, but he was trying to say that the way he said it is that evolution redefined, not a place where natural selection occurs with coincident rules, but a place where lives are being changed. Webster defines evolution as a process of developing into a better state. And so I want to hear how they're trying to put that together in school. Now, describe to me what creationism is and what evolution is as far as the debate is concerned.
Basically, you have two possible explanations as to how things came into existence. The more common view, which is presented in the public schools generally, we're bombarded with it in newspapers, on television, radio, just everything you can imagine, is oriented from the standpoint that way back somewhere in time that there was something, they're not sure exactly what it was, and from this unknown something there evolved over billions and billions of years all the great variety of life forms that are in existence now. All of this was through essentially a chance process. These were accidents that occurred repeatedly over billions of years, and so now things are like we see them. That's the evolutionary idea. The option to that, of course, is that there is creation and that God created all things essentially as they are now. Now, we all recognize that things do change. I will not in the debate be arguing that things don't change. I'll be saying that we do not have change of the kind that evolution describes, where you start out maybe with, way back in time, a one-cell creature of some kind, you know, whatever, and it evolves into higher and higher life forms until finally you get to human beings. Of course, the Bible doesn't teach anything of that kind, neither does science, though, and we'll be arguing it primarily from the standpoint of the scientific evidence.
Now, how do they come up with the idea that it is just evolved? How do you feel that they actually think that it evolved from one amoeba? I mean, has there ever been any concrete evidence that there was anything found for the transition states from amoeba to man?
No. In fact, that's one of the strong arguments against the theory of evolution. If the theory were true, you would necessarily have to have not just a few, but hundreds and thousands, perhaps millions of transitional forms, starting with the single cell, or perhaps even before the cell.
Yeah, how did the first cell come in
right.
existence?
So you have a problem with the beginning from the evolutionary standpoint. But there should be many, many transitional forms between all the different stages. And of course, sometimes they will argue that when it comes to human beings that there are some transitional forms that allegedly they have found. Among them, you have what's commonly called Nebraska man. And
why don't you describe it?
Well, what this amounts to was a discovery that was made of some fossil remains, and the claim was made that this is a missing link between the apes and human beings. And they went so far as to take this small amount, in fact it was just one tooth was what was actually discovered. And from this they even formed drawings of what kind of lifestyle these people lived and what they looked like. And,
from one tooth?
From one tooth. And a few years later they discovered the remainder of this creature from which this tooth came, and it happened to be an extinct pig. And so they really were forced to admit that all of this hypothesizing about the missing link was just totally fabricated. It was the imagination of people who really wanted to believe in evolution, to the extent that they took a single tooth and they manufactured a human being out of it, or a link between apes and human beings. But that's how far that they will go at times to try to establish the missing links that you've referred to, the transitional forms.
It wouldn't be so bad to come from an ape. I could handle that better than to come from, how do we get from the amoeba to the ape then? Let's take that. Where is the evidence that
where's any evidence that that has happened?
There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever.
And if it does, why don't animals have thought in the sense of laughter, and why don't they create things themselves like humans are able to think and develop a way to write, a way to computers? I mean, what do the evolutionists say about those reasons and those things that animals do not have laughter or some of the things that humans have?
They really have no explanation that I know of, and I see a major problem. Of course, those of us who believe the Bible know that man is very different from the animals. The evolutionists will lump human beings in with the various animals, not only the apes, but all the other kinds of animals. But man is distinct from them. We know the Bible shows that God created man in his own image. And man has a soul, a spirit, which makes the human being what he is, that animals do not have. And evolution is totally unable to account for this spirit or soul that human beings have. And I think that's a major fault in the scientific approach to things. Not that science is bad, but that people have abused science, and they have put man in the category with all of these animals, and just a step removed from the plants, and a further step removed from inanimate things like the rocks and the things of that kind. All of that came about through the same basic process, according to evolutionists. But man, I contend that if we categorize things correctly, that man would be a totally separate category. Man is not a plant, he's not an animal, but he is one made in the image of God, a special category made to glorify God by doing his will.
And some of the evolutionists don't believe there is a God, evidently, or they can't believe. How do you help another human being to have the reality of God so that he would have a basis to believe that a God, the God, could create a man in his own image? How do you help another human believe that, Brother Thrush?
I think a beginning place, since many people are not willing to take the Bible and to start with that, a logical beginning place is to look at the creation or look at the world. And we see evidence that there must be one who is in control, who has brought all these things into existence. There must be God. Now, we cannot know about what God wants us to do or about God's nature fully from the creation. That's where we have to go to God's revelation to learn that. But I think a logical place to begin is look at the creation. And science can be beneficial in a lot of ways to help us to understand the relationships that exist. But what people sadly have done is misuse science and turned away from God, rather than seeing that science points to a designer, a creator, a higher being that we're responsible to. And if one will just look at the evidence from nature, one can see there must be God. And then, of course, we search the Scriptures to see what God truly is like and what He wants us to do.
Some of the newspaper articles recently have said that they have now created life in a test tube. Can you help to expound upon that, or did they take actual human cells from a man and a male and a female to create those?
Well, there's been a number of instances where that claim has been made. Life has not been created by men, period. Men, scientists, have taken living material and done things with it, but they haven't created any life. The life was there. If it's in the form of what the male and the female contribute in order to make a human being, or what animals would do similarly, the life is there already. And men may take in an artificial way and combine those things, and the life will come forth, but it's because God put the life there, not because men have come up with it. Men haven't come up with anything. In fact, the scientists will admit, and it's been proven experimentally over and over, that life comes only from life. It was believed by some scientists years ago that you could take some matter over here and leave it for a while and life would spring from it. But that was an error, and scientists recognize that there's no such thing as spontaneous generation. Life comes only from life. But the evolutionist has to have, wherever the life started in their scheme, it had to come from something that wasn't living. It had to bridge the gap from non-living to living. And that's a serious problem for a scientist because they know that spontaneous generation is not true.
What about some Christians or some people who believe in God, believe in the creation, feel that maybe there was a creation, that this was God's way to create, was through evolution? Have you ever heard that, and how do you counteract that?
The theistic evolution, basically the idea that the person believes that God somehow was involved in the process. And that sounds very good, because at least they do believe in God. And couldn't God have chosen to have things evolve? Well, the major problem I see with that is that it doesn't help matters any. You still have the same problem that people are not accepting what God says about it. Now, if you believe that God was in the process, then why not take what God says about it? And God says that He created. It doesn't say that He allowed evolution to occur from lower forms up to man through a chance process. And that's what evolution is. It's a chance process. Accident upon accident happening over billions of years, and finally, here we are. But that's not the way God said that it happened. So you can't believe the Bible and believe in even theistic evolution.
Now, we'll take a chance on telling my age by saying, back in the olden days, even when I was a teenager, we were taught evolution in our schools. But somehow I never would register because I knew there was a God. However, over the few decades, our young people aren't always getting the training that maybe my parents gave me. So how did we allow evolution to get into our textbooks in the first place? If this is a country that, as I said, built on the established so that people would have an opportunity to worship God, how did it ever get into our books?
I think that there's been a tremendous swing. At one time, the vast majority of people, and even scientists, were Bible believers. Most of the great scientists of the past that you'll see cited in the textbooks for making all these contributions believed in creation. But basically with the time of Charles Darwin, and of course he was a major contributor, this began to swing. And the scientific community, most of them, there are many creation scientists today, but most of the scientists began to look for an alternative to creation, mostly because if you don't believe in God, that's the only alternative. And they began to, over a period of time, to have the greater influence. And so that when, of course, the Scopes trial that you referred to, during that period of time, there was a shift so that the unbelieving scientists were able to insert their beliefs into the textbooks. They got the influence in the scientific meetings and all of this, so that those who believe in creation were basically pushed out. And the creation view cannot even be expressed publicly under most considerations in the schools, for example. Now, I do want to mention that, of course, I teach in a public school, and the debate will be held in a public school, so I appreciate that opportunity that we have in a public school to present evidence for and against evolution. But there are many teachers in the public schools that believe in creation. And sometimes people think, well, the public schools are all bad. Well, there are some problems. But many of the teachers in public schools, even science teachers, do believe in creation, and will make known to the students that evolution is a theory and that it's not the only option. Of course, we generally are not allowed to teach that creation as such in the classes.
Why can't creation be taught as a theory, if that's what we have to use, at least to get it into the textbook? It wasn't even in my textbook. That was not in the textbook, because I remember that being a big thing and us discussing it at the time.
There are laws in many of the states against basically the teaching of religion. And unfortunately, I think it's a mistake, but people often think of teaching that creation is true is teaching religion, when it's not necessarily so. I believe that one could teach that creation is true without teaching religion. That is, you can present just the scientific evidence. And I don't really see any reason why one would object to presenting scientific evidence of creation.
Give me some examples, Professor Thrasher, of scientific
for example, the fossil evidence. The textbooks on science, biology in particular, will give evidence that, we have these fossils, and that shows that the Earth is very old, and that shows that evolution has taken place. When actually that's not true. If you look at the fossil evidence, there are huge gaps between what the Bible would call the different kinds. You don't find the transitional forms in the fossil record, but there ought to be thousands and thousands of them. That's not presented in the textbooks. They should present the fact, and many of the scientists who are evolutionists have acknowledged that there ought to be there, but they haven't discovered those transitional forms. I believe students should know that those are missing, and that is evidence that the separate kinds came into existence suddenly by creation rather than over billions of years through evolution. The matter of the great age of the Earth, that is, you'll hear about dating methods that says the Earth is so many billion, 4.5 billion years old, for example. They don't bother to mention that there are many other dating methods that would show the Earth is only thousands of years old, perhaps 10,000 or somewhere in that range. But all of those methods, and there are dozens of them, that show a relatively young Earth, you won't find those in the textbooks. They just dismiss those, though they're just as valid as those relatively few methods that show an old Earth. So basically, they present the evidence that would seem perhaps to favor evolution, like those dating methods, but they ignore all of those that would go against evolution. And that's what I believe we ought to have fair treatment, presenting the scientific evidence, even in the public schools.
What would have to happen in order to have fair treatment?
I believe that people, human beings, citizens, would need to contact their legislature, the Board of Education. When the time comes for the adoption of textbooks, they would need to be active in the process of adoption of textbooks and stress what they want. I believe firmly that the majority of people in this country believe in creation. But the majority of scientists believe in evolution because that's the only option. If you don't accept God, you have no option but that man has evolved and all other things have evolved. And therefore, basically, people just have to express what they believe, because we live in a democracy, and surely the majority of people ought to have something to say about what's in the books and what their children are taught. So people have to speak up and express themselves on the subject.
Why have we been so apathetic about that? Parents, why didn't my parents do something about it? Why didn't I do something about it? It was like my head was in the sand, or I was apathetic or not awake or something. How can we awaken people?
I think that these scientists who are evolutionists, and many of them atheists, that they have conveyed the idea that ordinary citizens like us, non-scientists, that you can't decide these things. This is a matter for experts to decide. And so you have to have a PhD in chemistry or biology or something like that in order to be able to consider the evidence. And I totally disagree with that. We have a jury system in this country. The people who are selected to be on a jury in a case are not experts. They may not be
average people.
Average people.
Even
but there is a judge who knows the rules of evidence, and there are two sides that are presented, one by the defense and one by the prosecution. They present the evidence, and the jury, just common citizens, decide on the basis of that. They don't have to be experts, but they're people who can use the intelligence that they have to listen to evidence and to make a decision. I believe we can do the same thing on evolution. But many of the scientists have tried and have convinced people, well, you're not experts, and so people have basically said, well, let the scientists decide. But they're not willing to do that on a lot of other things. And I don't believe we ought to allow them to decide for us on the theory of evolution either.
Now, when you have this debate on the theory of evolution versus creationism, what do you think will be some of his evidence that he'll present?
I can only speculate, of course, because there's so much material, but I would presume the fossil record. Mm-hmm. That's about the number one thing that they'll try to cite. And as I said, I believe it's strongly against the theory of evolution. And I'll try to point that out. If he doesn't bring that up, I'll bring it up because people need to understand that anyway. I suppose he would try to present some of these so-called transitional forms, the 8 men that have been published in the newspapers and books from time to time, things like that. probably dating methods showing the Earth is very, very old. I would suspect those would be the major things.
Now, this is going to be at the, tell us again where it is and when and who's going to be there and all the details.
Okay, it'll be December 2nd at 7 o'clock in the evening at Decatur High School Auditorium, Decatur High School in Decatur, Alabama, on Prospect Drive. And Mr. David White, who's a chemistry teacher, and myself, I'm a math teacher, will be discussing for 2 hours that subject, and we will essentially have alternating speeches of different lengths, but altogether it'll be 2 hours of discussion.
Perot and Gore. Oh, no, White and Thrasher. White will be affirming evolution and Thrasher denying evolution, and doesn't say anything here about creationism, but that's what you'll be affirming.
Right. Necessarily, if you don't believe in evolution, you believe in creation. That's the only option.
That's the two options. And that will be coming to you very shortly. December the 2nd will be here before you know it. We are so happy that you joined us today. You are not only a teacher, but you're also a preacher here in Huntsville. In fact, at the church that meets over in...
It's Church of Christ on Winchester Road in Huntsville.
And I sure appreciate Joyce Duncan and telling me about this debate. She's excited about having it. So Thomas Thrasher and David White in a debate, in fact. Been a long time since we've heard of debates. My dad used to debate a person named Carl Ketcherside, and he would always get very excited about doing that. A lot of people came, so we're expecting a lot of people to be at the Decatur High School Auditorium, 1011 Prospect Drive in Decatur on December the 2nd, Thursday at 7 p.m. And we do want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, a safe Thanksgiving as you go back to your home again and get into the further holiday spirit. And we want you to take a moment out on Thursday, December the 2nd, and come and hear the public debate on the theory of evolution with David White and Thomas Thrasher. I'm Bonnie Libhart. For Bonnie's books, video, or cassette tapes, call 1-800-872-2178, Speakers USA, or Post Office Box 2583, Huntsville, Alabama 35801. That's 1-800-872-2178.
Without a vision, the people perish. Welcome to Vision Plus, a program featuring a positive outlook, dealing with everyday situations of marriage, children, and business with challenges and opportunities. Believing Philippians 4:13. You and I can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. Teacher, author, speaker, delighting audiences from New York to Sacramento with a heart and message for the people today. Here's Bonnie Libhart.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Vision Plus. I'm Bonnie Libhart, and I have a whole group of people here that have a vision for helping maybe even you. We'll find out as we meet these different people. You know, we're going through unprecedented change. There are people who are being moved out of the workforce, or workforce is being condensed. And I know, for instance, one of our major companies that's in this Tennessee Valley area, they had 50,000 employees. Now they have 20,000. And you know what? I think all of the management expect at least the same amount of work out of those 20,000 that the 50,000 we're doing. And we're going to find out how this can be possible. And I want you to meet our panel now to talk about a company that's being introduced into the Tennessee Valley area. It's in Chicago and Atlanta. Hey, we don't want those people to get ahead of us. Simi Valley, California, and I understand into Dallas and Knoxville. And how about Huntsville, Alabama? And with me today are some management part of this team. First of all, to my right, I guess that would be to your left, is Mel Galloway. Mel, welcome.
Thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate being here.
Mel is part of the management team. He's going to be going eventually, I hope your wife and son know about it, to Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona,
yes, right.
to become a managing partner for Train America. Train America is what we're talking about. And now I'd like for you to meet one of our managing partners, Gary Stevens. Gary, hello and welcome.
Bonnie. Thank you very much.
Gary's been he's been training. I'll have each one of them tell you a little bit about themselves. He has been an actor in Hollywood. He has been, I heard about him, they went to church in Gunnersville, and I don't know what all else he does, but he's also a realtor, as I've been for many years, and I know when you get to meet each one of them, you'll learn a little bit about them. And you may recognize this next person. He's the principal of the school, but he has been here on television for how many years? 3 or 4 years?
4 years.
Yeah, yes. Mike Mays. Mike is not only the principal of Faith Covenant Academy, he's also a pastor, preacher for Faith Church. Right. And also we have Jack Walsh. Jack has a NASA background.
Yeah, a little bit. Working with a NASA contractor, Bonnie. Thanks for having me on board.
Yes. Well, let's find out a little bit about Train America. Train America, as I said, is a company that has been introduced. We have something coming up that is December the 9th. However, you may be watching this after that's already occurred, and we want you to know that there are other dates that we have too that we're having. This particular one is at the Huntsville Marriott Space and Rocket Center, but let's start just with you. Tell me a little bit about some of the training that you've done in the past, Mel.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. I've been involved with training for the last 16 to 17 years in a variety of different positions and capacities. I've worked with the Chamber of Commerce and with Whitaker Corporation and with several different companies like this. And some of the things that we have seen in the training field is that there is more and more of a need, and yet at the same time it's become so expensive for most companies it's very hard for them to be able to get their people to the training center and still be able to take advantage of a good program. And that's what Train America is trying to do, is to assist us in being able to meet their needs in their particular areas of responsibilities that are becoming more important each day.
Gary, what have you been doing? What are some of the things you've been doing, and why did you get involved in Train America?
I got involved in Train America, Bonnie, because it's a very exciting concept. To me, it's very rewarding in helping industry go through this tremendous change, as you mentioned earlier. The evolution that's happening now, the reduction of workforce. And I think Train America is going to be an essential tool in helping the industrial community go through this change process.
How would it be an essential tool for
Well,
industry?
we can help people on an individual, personal basis and a professional basis cope with the change and help them learn how to be more productive with their personal and professional time and be more a well-rounded human being.
I want
once
to
they
hear
go through
more
this
about,
process.
you're actually teaching team building, and
right.
Mel is teaching time organization and a lot of other things he can teach. And Mike Mays, one of the things that he's teaching is attitude. Now, don't have an attitude with me, but tell me what you mean when you're talking about, give us an overview of what you'll be teaching in the course on attitude.
Well, we'll be talking about different techniques that will help a person to stay positive in the workplace. We live in a very negative society, and my personal feeling is that if you believe that you're defeated, you are defeated. And I feel like that we will just talk about some things, some areas that people can do. Matter of fact, it'll actually be approximately 7 different areas that we'll be discussing in pretty much detail. Things like the physical, exercising. A lot of times you may need to change your hairdo or buy some clothes or something, and that will help your attitude, just different things. We get a lot of class involvement, and it's just a very upbeat class, and we're very excited to be a part of it.
I think that Kathy, your wife, who a lot of our viewers have seen on television many times, she is helping to write the curriculum. And another person who's helping to write some of the curriculum is Jack Walsh. Jack, tell us a little bit about your background and why you're involved in Train America.
Well, Bonnie, I've spent some time in the military, some time working with NASA on a NASA contract, and most recently I've been working in the computer world and selling training, which is what naturally brought me into Train America. I think everyone here has touched on the values that Train America brings. Train America recognizes change for what it is. It is not something to fear. It happens to be part of our daily life, and it seems to be happening at a rate beyond anything we've seen before. So we provide, with our training, some of the tools necessary to make this life, which is very exciting, even interesting, instead of treating life as it could be, a threat. And what Train America also does is it brings the price to a level in which many more people can take this class. And in fact, I was talking to somebody at one of the major companies today, and one of the points that was brought up was a point that you mentioned earlier, Bonnie. It was that instead of spending thousands of dollars on the hundreds of our management leaders, Train America provides industry a chance to spend just a few dollars on thousands of their workers. And of course, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the job is done. That's where the customer is met and satisfied by the person who is the employee that we can help train.
One of the shortcomings, I think, that I've seen in industry, but also in real estate and other things, is that so many times we feel autonomous and don't always work as a team. And you'll see the thing happening where there's turnover or absenteeism. People are unhappy, so they don't want to go to work. Well, tell us a little bit about team building, Gary.
Well, team building is a very exciting concept. And, you know, the American companies now are taking it more and more seriously. It's a proven fact that two people can almost double production, the production of one person, 2.5 times, as a matter of fact, can produce 2.5 times the amount of work as two people, a single person. So teaming up gives us an opportunity to interact with each other, to recognize each other's skills, recognize each other's contributions, and pool those together. Like, two heads are better than one. We've always known that, but to put it to practice in industry has not been a habit. That's what we, as trainers with Train America, can do. We can come into an industry, into a company, show them how to work together as a team, how to cope with their differences, and also the things they have in common, and put those to work.
Well, in the industry is a great way. We have to have a sharper workforce that now can be excited about working because they still have a job, and people who maybe have, well, they're outsourced, or they're now available to have other opportunities to work for, to go toward. Well, those people can take some of the training so they can get the slight edge, as they talk about in racing. Mike, how can this same concept be in the family life, the team building, the attitude? How would that help?
Well, you're kind of touching maybe on some of the curriculum that we're working on a little bit as far as developing and to submit, but I believe that a family needs to work together as a team and be supportive of the other family members. I believe it's so important if the husband is out working, and nowadays just about, you have both a husband and wife working. I think it's so important that each other support the other in their efforts and build them up and encourage them so that they will be successful. Let's face it, you get up in the mornings and if you do not have that good positive input from your partner, it will probably affect your day, the rest of the day. You may go in and snap at the secretary, kick the dog on your way out, and so forth. So the team building aspect that Gary was talking about is so important to the family.
And to have the whole family involved. I think one of the
Yes,
things
absolutely.
I noticed in what you're doing in teaching team building is the fact that you get everyone involved.
Yes.
And that's the same way in a family. The
Right.
children, young people, you're Nicole and Noel,
Right.
and our children, they need to have a part of that. Your son, too, he's 15, isn't he?
Just turned 16.
16. Oh, my goodness. He'll let us know. If we
That's right.
You know, Bonnie, one of the things that I have always said, any time that is spent with your children is never wasted. And so many times, and I work with young people every day in the school, kids, so I see so many kids that long for just that attention and that touch and that love, you know, that the parents and the family members, you know, can give. So the family is so important.
How do you help, let's say, a father that's real busy and doesn't realize that he is not with his family? How could a person wake up to that fact, and what could they do to maybe work better as a team in the family and have a good attitude? Get any ideas, any of the three of you?
I think there's several different things that can be done in that direction. I think this is basically a lot of what Train America really is. We sit down and prioritize what is really important in our life. Several good points have been brought up through this discussion in that we don't have much time out to ourselves, to our families, to our business anymore. We're running so fast. Unless we sit down and really prioritize what is important in our lives, setting goals, what do we want to achieve. And as Mike mentioned, I think it's very important that as a family we learn to do that. As you meet together as a family and discuss together as a family, then it leads over into your business work as well, because you learn to communicate, to give and take. And time management is extremely important, as well as the attitude, the goal setting in each of the areas. And then it all combines together in a team building effort, whether it's on a family basis or on a business basis, either one.
Well, give me a simple examples of some time management or time work, how we can improve our time, especially, you know, now we're around the holiday season and it seems like there's 3 things to do every 5 minutes, but give us an idea of how we can better manage our time.
Well, let me give you an example. I had a lady that came in and talked to me one time about time management and how it was affecting her life. She was a single mother with 2 children, and she didn't feel like she had the time to really spend with them that she'd like to. She was in the insurance business, and the first thing we did was sat down and looked at what she was doing with the 24 hours that she did have. And we actually made an accounting for a 2-week period of time of what went on in her life. And all of a sudden she found that she was spending a lot of time at coffee breaks and a lot of time at lunches and a lot of times that were not productive time for herself. And as we sat down and started remapping her day, she found that there was a lot of time available that she could take that were not productive now, turn into productive time, which would allow her more time with her family in the evening. And after doing this for about a month and a half, she found that all of a sudden she had the quality time that Mike was talking about, where she could sit down and spend time with the kids doing homework or sitting down and going to a movie, different things that she hadn't had time to do before. So it was very, very beneficial to her. She also found that her production at work went up double, because instead of standing around at the Coke machine or whatever talking to the other people, she was in her office making the calls and doing those things that would bring her in the business that she wanted.
Mm-hmm. So it's a simple thing, maybe it isn't simple, but the formula sounds simple. Prioritize your time, identify some wasted moments, wasted time,
Right.
and then decide what is important to you and what you maybe could do. Learn to say no to some things too.
That's
in
correct.
addition
There's
to
sometimes you have to just sit
the
down and say no.
Coke and
it's not
coffee
important.
time. There's also just there are times when, and I found out, like, he asked me, I was teaching a Sunday school class and had asked Mike had asked me to teach a Sunday school class when I'm talking about him as church. That's Brother Mike. But anyway, when I got into Train America and we started, and Gary and I and some of us were starting it, I found out I was totally out of time, and I said, what about if my husband teaches the class? As it turns out, he's doing a much better job, and had I kept teaching, well, I would never have realized that, and he's just loving it.
You know, so sometimes if we delegate to someone else, they may just be thrilled to have that opportunity and do an even better job than we could do. And that's probably one of the things of time management and being able to delegate.
And, you know, it's so easy to get so stretched out that you're not effective at anything. So, you know, a lot of times we have to, you know, like Mel was talking about, put priorities on what's important to us, and we may have to just back off on some things and say, hey, I'm going to put them on the back burner, and then we can go back to them.
Well, I'd like to, Gary, since you are one of the managing partner associates, I'd like for you to go over kind of how the whole system of Train America works.
Primarily what we try to do, Bonnie, is we have 3 stages or 3 areas of development. We have personal development, and some of the classes related to that are personal power. Those are self-esteem building classes. How to keep your self-esteem healthy, how to work both at your work and in your personal life. And then there's personal time management. Those are some of the personal kind of development to build your each individual in his own case. And then we have interpersonal skills that we work on, like the art of communicating, calming upset customers, beyond supervision. Then we have some creativity classes, which are personal. And then we work in the workplace leadership kind of classes, like learning to lead, managing organizational change, team building, and some of the other
one of them is the difficult people. That's one of the
dealing
most
with difficult
popular
people.
ones, because it's so easy to take things personal.
It is. And you know, a lot of people do that because of their self-image. You know, there's a self-image problem maybe that they haven't dealt with, and they don't realize that they are not personally involved or responsible for what's going on in the workplace. It may be a problem of management or organization. And
or if it's a customer that's and you're waiting on the customer, and the customer's angry about couldn't find a parking place or got a ticket, we never know. Could be, but they yell at, could be the clerk in the store, could be the principal in the high school, or it could be someone at the hotel where they check in, and that person reacts to that in maybe an anger possibly, when if they could be proactive, in other words, just realize that is their problem, the way they're acting.
Absolutely. And so we try to address the person as a whole person, both in their personal life and in their professional life, so that they're more well-rounded in all 3 of those areas. And I think that's the goal of Train America as we go out and present our classes to industry.
And we do possibly have another opening or 2 for backup faculty members. So that if there's anyone that really just loves to get on this lectern stage and speak, or they would like to be training people, then they could get in touch with us at 539-8868, 205 area code. And also, if they would just possibly like to be a training consultant and go into companies and talk to them, that'd be a possibility. And we have some areas like up in the Shoals area, Sheffield and Florence, those areas, and down in Gadsden, maybe even Birmingham, where we could use some people in addition to the Tennessee Valley area.
Absolutely, Bonnie. I'm very interested in talking to people who are interested in working as training consultant. That's more of a sales capacity and a consulting capacity as opposed to training. And if they'd like to call me, they can reach me at 205-536-0995. And I'll be happy to talk with you and discuss the possibilities of Train America.
Well, one of the things I had thought about is what do you get out of it as being a faculty member? Now you're all faculty. What do you get? What does it do for you?
Well, it's a lot of personal satisfaction because it's doing something that I enjoy doing. And to see, I enjoy communicating with people, Bonnie, and to see faces light up when they know that I've touched on a nerve that possibly they can change something about their life for the better. So being a faculty member is a lot of fun. I've been, well, really, I was trained in college in Christian education. I've been in education for several years and public speaking for several years, and it's just fun. And I really believe that, you know, your work needs to be challenging and fun.
And also, you're making an impact on people's lives,
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
What do you feel that some of the things that you gain from it, Kerry?
Well, I think I heard once that the most rewarding job will challenge you in your physical talents, your emotional abilities, and your mental abilities, all three of those areas. The more challenge you have in those three areas, the more rewarding your job is. And if you're lacking in one or the other, then you probably will not be as satisfied as you could be. This job challenges me in all three areas to the great extent. Yes, and I find it very rewarding, and I guess my humanitarian needs to be able to contribute to the growth of people in the ways we've talked about here today.
How about you, Mel? What is it about training people that excites you and makes you?
I think there's several different things. As been brought up throughout this meeting, people are going through many changes in their life, and Train America gives them an opportunity to be able to face those changes and adapt to the changing times in a very positive direction. And as a trainer, you get an opportunity to sit down with them and being able to work with them on an individual basis as well as a group basis on being able to see where making one or two adaptations in their life or adjustments in their life can make a total different outlook on their business profession, on their home life, in their personal life as well. So it, as has been mentioned, it gives you a great satisfaction as you see the change within the individual. And one of the things I really like about Train America, as Jack mentioned earlier, is it brings the programs to you personally at a cost that can be affordable. And if a person can get into a good, steady program of upgrading their life and getting positive reinforcement on a continual basis, then it helps them throughout their entire career.
It's comparable to other training that's in this area, but one thing that's different about it, there's several, but one unique feature is the layered learning concept. In the Bible, it's called precept upon precept, line upon line, where you learn this and later you learn a little bit more. And so we have where you can learn attitude 1, attitude 2, attitude 3, team building 1, 2, and 3, so forth. So where you go in for a couple hours, go back to work if you want to, or if you're a homemaking engineer, you can go back home. And if you're a person that is wanting to upgrade some of your skills, this would be a possibility for you. What are some of the benefits that you think that a person, what will they walk away from when they've gone through your course on attitude, for instance?
Well, I believe that they're going to be exposed to some information that perhaps they've heard before. But if we can just key in on 2 or 3 main things that they can take and tomorrow go back to the office and put them into practice. Let's say, for instance, you know, and I love what Zig Ziglar said, try getting up on the other side of the bed. You know, instead of saying, good Lord, it's morning, wake up and say, good Lord, good morning, Lord, good morning, Lord. And you know, that's true because, you know, God has given us another day and He's helped us to wake up, and I think we need to have that kind of good, you know, attitude. And I just feel like that a person can come for 2 hours to a class and take something real back to them and start working on 1 or 2 or 3 areas in their life to try to help them be a more positive
What
person.
are some of the methodologies that you use in order to get that message across? I know one thing, I was in for a shock. I think everybody in the next seminar room was too. I said, oh, is this the Mike Mays I know? Tell us some of the things and some of the songs you use.
Well, I like to use a song called The Eye of the Tiger. That, you know, it talks about you're hungry, you're out on the street, but nothing's going to hold you back. We use overheads, we use handouts, questions and answers. We have work sessions. A seminar I did several days ago, I used the song, "I'm just an old chunk of coal, but I'm going to be a diamond one day."
Oh,
That's what we're doing.
Powerful.
We're out to be diamonds.
Well, in this next seminar, if someone will buy one ticket, then we'll allow someone to go as a complimentary ticket so that you can take your spouse along so they will know what you've been going through also. And the one that's coming up that, although when you see this program, maybe it won't have been shown, but if it was, then there will be another one. But this one is December the 9th, 1993, at the Space and Rocket Center, the Marriott, Huntsville Marriott at the Space and Rocket Center. And you may call, fax, phone, come in person for getting your tickets if you'd like. And so we feel like this would be a complimentary ticket so that they can take a partner along with them at this time. And you will be exposed to these different courses. We hope that you will contact us. I want to thank you very much, Mel Galloway.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here.
With Train America, another managing partner, and that is Gary Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Bonnie.
I'm allowed to have one blank moment in my lifetime. I forgot what year that happened before. One time when I was 14 years old, I ran off the stage. I couldn't remember my name, much less your name. And Mike Mays. Mike, thank you so much for being a part of this program and a part of Train America.
Thank you.
And a part of a lot of other things that you're involved in, Faith Covenant, Faith Academy. And we hope that you will join us also. I'm Bonnie Libhart, managing partner with Train America, and along with these fine gentlemen, and we have some other ladies too, besides me, there's Pat Brooks that's working with us, and Debbie Enfinger that's working with us. I think Liz Dempsey will possibly Elizabeth Kennemore before she marries and moves away, but we have some exciting people working with us too. I'm sure I've left out some of the other faculty members. Forgive us for doing that. Along with these people, I'm Bonnie Libhart. Bless your heart for watching. For Bonnie's books, video, or cassette tapes, call 1-800-872-2178. Speakers USA or Post Office Box 2583, Huntsville, Alabama 35801. That's 1-800-872-2178. A way that you could have a great relationship with all the people in your life. You'd like to know about it, wouldn't you? Some of you may remember when the pace car hit the photographer's stand, almost broke my husband's neck. And from that experience, we wrote a book, Born Again Marriage. It's about relationships. And you may have that for $5. Here you will see Post Office Box 2583, Huntsville 35804, or call 1-800-872-2178 and get your very own copy. Now, if you respond to this total package of the 3 books, Emily, which is about our daughter that got killed and the things that she did in Russia as a Russian interpreter, and the Build a Better You starting now, then you may have the total package for $19.95. Please call 1-800-872-2178 or write to Post Office Box 2583, Huntsville 35801.